Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our first product leader webinar from a series we intend to organize once a month for the foreseeable future. On this event, we're focusing on gathering experts and professionals in the product field across Europe and US, and not only, in order to create a community that can help and exchange information and knowledge in these unprecedented times of change and challenge. My name is Vlad, and I'm working with Sigmar, a top Irish recruitment company, as a lead recruiter consultant across the EMEA region. And we are part of Group Adequate, one of the largest staffing firms in the world. Today we'll be talking about a topic that comes up more and more in growing organizations between the product members and leaders across different companies, and that's how can we build world-class product organization. So thank you all for joining, and also thank you to our guest speakers, which I'm delighted to present, Hengameh, Rezaei, and Ryan Farley. Hengameh lives in Stockholm, Sweden, and she's coming from a strong technical and product background. She has worked with the likes of Ericsson, Google, and Symphony. And when it comes to Ryan, he's based in Dallas, US, and he has over 10 years experience in the product area, focusing on growing and scaling companies and teams across different sectors. So thank you everybody for being here. Just before I give the chance to the speakers to take the virtual mic, I just wanted to mention that if you have any kind of questions on the topics, there is an ask a question down below, almost kind of close to the middle. And on the right, there is say something nice, where you can just present yourself, say hi, and so on. Regarding the questions, we will be asking them after each presentation. And at the end, we'll have a few more minutes just in case you have something kind of more off topic, etc. So that's it for me. Hengameh, if you'd be so kind and take over.
You're welcome. Thank you everyone for having me here. I don't need to introduce myself, so I can just right away share my screen and jump into the topic for you. So I assume that you are seeing my screen right now, right?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. So I'm in the present mode. The purpose of this meeting for me, when I heard from Vlad to what are those keys to build a world-class product organization, I just right away began to think like, wow, this is a very ideal subject and very broad, very big. And first thing first was, there are so many keys to build a world-class product organization, and we all know that there are not only just very limited number of the keys. And we should know that no matter what kind of key we are looking into, there is always something that we can find to improve. And whatever we are describing here, we are discussing here, it's not really holistic thing that you can just pick it and apply it to your organization and to your team and it will work like magic. No, you have to understand the culture, the company, the product, the nature of that organization, and combine all of these together and pick whatever you learn and then drive that work with your team and with your organization. So in this specific session, I'm gonna cover these 4 subjects. First of all, in my mind, one of the key to build a world-class product organization is we want to know how to inject our customer into the product organization. The second key is how to define success in failure, how to not be afraid of things and changes. The third one is OKRs. I don't know how many of you have heard about OKRs. We will go very, very high level about it, and I will give you very high level tips and tricks around it, but we can discuss. I mean, this OKR by itself can be a week of workshop even. We can go through the details in other sessions or when we are having some talks. And last but not least, we want to close the technical gaps between the PMs and engineers. This last topic is very dear to me. I have dealt with it so many times in many teams and many products. And the reason behind it is I was engineer from the beginning. So in the nature, I was engineer. Right now, I'm driving the product. And I myself as an engineer had this issue as well. And I could see it. And I could see how organizations can improve this. That's why I covered it in this session for you. So first, how to inject your customer into your product organization. I think this image is quite well known to most of you who are dealing with software deployment cycles. And I think many of you have seen this in a variety of sessions of software development cycle and so on. Our purpose is of this picture is showing that we do not want to see Word through one person or one organization lens. We want to see it through lens of customers, PMs, engineers, then combine this image early enough before we go through this hassle and through this mess. This is cost. This is mess. This is unsatisfaction. This is not bringing trust to your customer. You want to avoid this. So this image is showing to you the clarity and the essence of the communication and what could be better to be done and bringing your customer into the process. But how do we do that? What are tips and tricks around it? So there are so many ways, but rule number one, you want to listen to your users. You want to listen to them as a PM. During this session of listening, you want to bring your engineers, you want to bring your designer, if the feature is front end, for example, feature or product, you want to have the same understanding, discussing it, go back, sit, build the prototype, bring it back again, and then get the confirmation and feedback from your customer. You do this iteration so many times until you get the satisfaction and okay from your customer. There are some ways of like automation as well. For example, there are so many tools and pipelines that you can set up without even doing manual work and putting cost on it. It's like A/B testing, for example, to roll out percentage to different users. And during this A/B testing, you have a chance to measure. Data is your friend. You want to gather those data, categorize them, understand the correlation of the metrics and your threshold and how your user behaved, put them all together to come up with some conclusion, and then talk to other teams, talk to your customer about it, and tell them, oh, by the way, I see that you don't click on this button. I have seen you that you have used this feature in my product so much. Why is that? Like if you have that data, you have the power to talk to your customer in a much clearer way and tell them how they are behaving even. There are different ways of like alpha, beta, EAP. I put all these acronyms. Maybe they are not familiar for everyone down below as well. You can go through all of these. You can sign some contracts and some signing up like paper or email event. Like, I want you to be my alpha users. It means that you will get this product. This is your expectations. This is the norm. This is the rule. This is what I expect from you. And this is what I provide to you. And make sure during all of these phases, you make it very clear with your users and customers that the more you collaborate with me, the more I provide the product that suits you, and make them motivated to work with you. And remember, during all of these phases, until the time that you go to the GA, perfectionism is your enemy. Why is that your enemy? It adds complexity, it adds cost, it adds the long time to the delivery. And at the end, it ruins the trust between you and your customer. So now key number 2, success in failure. We want to talk about that. Before I tell you how to define this success in failure and what could be your tips and tricks in it, you see the quote on top. I was reading a book. I'm not sure how many of you have read this book. It's called The Obstacle is the Way. It was a very, very interesting story about Thomas Edison. So I wrote it down to read it for you as well, that you see how a person who is so creative, so smart can deal with failure that can break down so many of us, even if the situation could be simpler. So I'm going to read and quote that book now. At around 5:30 in the evening on December 10, 1914, a massive explosion erupted in West Oregon, New Jersey. 10 buildings in legendary inventor Thomas Edison plant, which made up more than half of the site, were in flames. Between 6 and 8 fire departments rushed into the scene, but the chemical-fueled inferno was too powerful to put out quickly. Edison calmly walked over to him. Calmly walked over to him as he watched the fire destroy his dad's work. So now it's Edison's son. In childlike voice, Edison told his 24-year-old son, "Go get your mother and all her friends. They will never see a fire like this again." When Charles objected, Edison said, "It's all right. We've just got rid of a lot of rubbish." But after just 3 weeks, after the insurance denied to pay them and so on, but after just 3 weeks with a sizable loan from his friend Henry Ford, Edison got part of the plant up and running again. His employees worked double shift and set the work producing more than ever. Edison and his team went on to make almost $10 million in revenue in the following year. So you see, the perception can be managed, actions can be directed. So we can always think clearly and creatively and respond creatively and look for opportunities. You always find success. I am very sure many of you have heard oh, this is a failure if I'm throwing a piece of code. So I'm going to build a code right now that is perfect and works for years and years, and it will be good there. It's not necessarily true all the time. So throwing a piece of code or a feature is a success. Why? Because you're eliminating the cost. You're optimizing your product. If you have delayed project, it looks like a failure. But what have you discovered is you realize there are some risks that you were never aware of it. And now you know what are those risks for the next bigger step. If you're finding the problems in early in the process that causing the delay also, this one also is a success. Because now it even can make you to decide not to go ahead with a much longer timeline and much longer cost for your organization. You always write postmortem. In your postmortem, remember, blame no one. I myself have a story. When I was at Google, there was an incident that myself actually caused it. And it was, I myself thought that, what could I write in postmortem? Except I say that I hit the wrong button. What could I write? And then the management and SREs, and you know that how postmortem is serious at Google. They came to me and said There is no one to blame. Explain that what that tool did, and then explain that if you have any solution for it to prevent it in future, that any other human can prevent it. There is no one we are going to mention here, and nobody is going to even know who has done this. So remember, you can do these practices. It brings a lot of trust and motivation. It makes your employee to be fearless, and you can ingest those solutions into the pipelines. You have a security pipeline, ingest it there. You have CI/CD pipeline, configuration pipeline, ingest it there. You have the whole of delivery pipeline, ingest it there and automate it for future out of the postmortem, and always give the reward to the impactful postmortems. So this is how you could define success and failure. Another key is OKRs. For the ones who don't know what OKRs stand for, is objectives and key results. OKR is one thing that will help you to talk the same language and enjoy each single step, even if it is a failure. But because you're driving towards the same goal, you are motivated and you know how to talk to each other. It's a tool to help you and help your engineers and so on. OKRs was invented by Andy Grove from Intel, and soon enough it brought up to other companies, especially Google. And Google is driving it from 1999 and is one of the companies that is like, OKR is one of the most important part of the process of all organizations, even if it is small project. It has driven 10x growth and innovation there. Other companies like LinkedIn, Uber, Twitter, all are like using OKRs and so on. So the purpose of OKRs is, you want to help people to choose what matters first. So if you're working with many different PMs in your organizations, and sometimes those PMs are working with the same set of engineers, and you will hear some complaints about the engineers, like, I don't know, everything has the same priority. I don't know what should I work on. I don't know how many of you have heard that, but this happens a lot, especially when it is cross teams and cross functionals and so on. You can talk with OKR. You can clear things up. You say like, okay, this work belongs to this OKR. This work belongs to this OKR. This work doesn't belong to any OKR. So which one of these OKRs are in priority against each other and so on. So it's very easy. It makes your life easy. This is a tip for you if you haven't worked or if you started to get to know what OKRs is. Don't define more than 3 or 5 KRs. That's enough for you. And never mix up the waterfall approach with OKRs. Many people think like, oh, OKR is like a CEO defining some goal and then it goes down and then one level down and until we have a KR. No. It's not how it should work. You have to have engineer driven, like bottom up, and then company driven, like leadership driven, top down. And then you will have some sessions to meet with each other and align the OKRs. We can talk about this and how to do that later on or in other sessions as well. So these were like tips. Then now you have defined your OKR. Always define the stretch KRs. If you know that, I'm going to give you an example. A PM will put that bring 7 new customers in H2. Just challenge that PM and tell them, I know 7, you put 7 because it's one, you know that 100% you can make it. Put 10 now. I want you to put 10 new customers instead of 7 new customers. So this means a stretch OKR, and make sure everyone in your organization understands that if you are achieving 70% of your KRs, you're doing a really good job. And if you are achieving all of your KRs by 100%, you are defining your KRs wrong. This is not how it should work. So you should always have stretched KRs. And you always do the encouragement of engineers, product teams, like org, the whole org, to use OKRs to assess themselves. Like when the performance review comes, you say like, these works you have done is related to which KR, this KR related to which goal of the company. And tell me, how did you help the whole company to grow? And make them to understand what is the goal and so on for the company. The scoring OKRs might be a big, like a competition, or be a bit like stressful for some people. Make sure everyone in your organization understands that these numbers are less important than the whole contextual feedback and discussion you get through it. Like, why this one got 70%? Why this KR got 50%? Were you blocked? Did you define KR wrong? Did other KRs came into the game? Why? Why did that happen? I mean, all of these discussions are much more valuable than just the score of the KRs. So a last key in my set of the keys is you want to close the technical gap between PMs and engineers. How do we do that? I mean, there are so many ways. People are different. They have different nature of way of communicating, different way of preferring to work and so on. So we can't like fix and change people. But one thing that many of orgs that are suffering might be the technical gap that exists between the PMs and the engineers. So number one, how they are communicating is very important. You have to understand how the PMs are communicating with each other and with engineers. Are they talking through Jira, documents, meetings, the sprint planning? I mean, are the PMs are participating in the stand-ups? I realize that PMs who are participating in the stand-ups just to listen in, they are much more aware of understanding the situation and velocity and everything that is so difficult to measure and all the time, lots of time spending on, than PMs that are sitting somewhere else and just thinking that, okay, this ticket has moved this much and this person has done this amount of work. Do you have all hands? How often do you have it? What do you discuss in those all hands? Do PMs meet each other and talk also? Do you have mentorship? Do you set up mob programming even for PMs? Do you have 20% project? 20% project, I should make this more clear because this term is coming from my Google background. So at Google, you were allowed by yourself to just come up with idea. Any idea. It should not be necessarily fully related to what you're working, but something that the whole company can get benefit of. And then you define it, you propose it, you talk to some engineers, whoever who is interested, you just announce it. You say like, this is my project. Anyone who wants to put 20% of his or her time on this project can join me. And then you will get some volunteers, some people who are interested. Then you will start like hacking together. You build something, then you just propose it and you present it to leaders. And if it is something valuable, it becomes, I mean, we have had so many 20% projects that ended up as a huge organization in a matter of 2 years. From 5 people, it ended up with 300 people. So those are like some way that you make your PMs to drive the things and communicate with engineers in an engineering matter and learn technical stuff if they are not technical. And do you have the culture of trust and autonomy? This is very important. I have seen so many teams that are suffering from exactly this autonomy, and they have been so much micromanaged. And PMs don't know that they are doing it to engineers. But when you look at it, and when you talk to engineers, when you talk to PM, you realize that, oh, it's just because a PM who wanted to control the whole situation and keep everything under control managed to somehow take away the autonomy to engineers who could be creative, who could do a good job. So they are just scared engineers sitting there. And they are like, we are not going to think just one step outside of the task that has been assigned to me. So try to have this culture, try to build it between PMs and engineers as well. And by the way, how do you have any channel that your PMs and engineers giving feedback to each other? Why do I say this last bullet point here? It's based on another experience. Like I have a friend. He is a very solid, experienced backend engineer, extremely good. Whenever you give him some work, he just goes ahead very quietly, building very complex architecture and backend and everything. And then I have seen how the PM talks in the meetings. He never mentions that person because that PM doesn't have any technical background. So that PM is just saying like, oh, the other person who is building this button is doing so much job, so many jobs. And this is demotivating that backend engineer. And that backend engineer, when he brought it up to me, I said, okay, how do you give feedback? Do you talk to your manager, engineering manager, to talk to that PM? And then his response was like, no, we don't have any channel. It's actually the PM who tells my manager how I am doing. And this PM doesn't know anything about technical or complexity of architecture. So make sure your PMs understanding this thing, and make sure if they don't, if your engineers are having, if they have such feedback, make sure your engineers have a channel to raise this and bringing it up, and then try to resolve this issue as well. So I went very fast. I tried to be fast. I don't know how long did it take, but all in all, this is what we covered now in this short time in a very, very high level. First of all, we talked about how to inject the customer into your product organization. We talked about some examples of how to think about a success, even if it looks like a failure, and even if it is a failure and people say the failure, and how not be afraid of moving forward or changing things. We talked about what is OKRs, some hints, tips and tricks, how to deal with OKRs, and some ways of dealing with closing the technical gaps between your PMs and engineers to drive you to build a world-class product organization. So that's it from me.
Thank you, Hengameh. It was really nice and a lot of useful information you have given us. And I would just like everybody to ask their questions as well whenever they get a chance. We also had a few questions previously. Just one second. So basically, when it comes to, let's say, failure in an organization, how do you maintain the positivity? Like everybody feels that, okay, look, things didn't go well. How do we show them that, look, it's okay, it's fine, let's just, maybe keep the momentum of, like, how do you see this aspect?
Based on my experience, just sitting there and tell them it's okay, it's fine, nothing is wrong, is not gonna solve the problem.
Exactly.
You're dealing with a smart group of people, and if they are engineers, then you have to, if they are interested in data, bring the data. Tell them this was the cost, this was the damage that we went through, and this is what we could prevent if we could have gone further.
Okay.
Give them numbers. Talk their language.
Mm-hmm.
So if you give them numbers, you do the post-mortem, you understand that, you know what, we did that and we learned this this and this and this lesson. And these lessons can be either way of working, can be either process. Let's improve our process.
Sure.
That was very interesting thing. We never thought of it. Or it can be automated into your process. Like, well done, you could find this and that to prevent us for future. We have bigger thing to do, and this is nothing that we should be afraid of. And accept it, just accept it, and telling them like, yeah, we accept that we did that, but right now our focus is not focusing on the failure, but we have to focus on the facts that let's list them. And let's see, can we learn anything or not? Or can we change anything or not? That's all.
Got it. Thank you for that. And one more question would be, how would you know which features should you throw away? Because you were saying you have to know when to kind of chop
I have done so many of these throwing away features that so what I do in the past 6 months, for example, I have thrown away about 3 big features that they have worked like day and night. So my decision was, okay, we are going to build this new feature. Tell me about which part of the code you're working on. And then they are explaining to me. And then I say, why does it take this amount of time? This is just some lines of code. And then they say like, oh, this component have this and this and that, and they all belong to other features. And then I will go ahead and I will do the investigation. So I built a dashboard, and my dashboard is evaluating each feature and the usability of each feature and how much ROI that feature brings to company. As soon as I see that something is not useful, I will decide to stop it, and I will decide to deprecate the code. So this is how I do it, and I do it very, exactly, brutally, throwing the feature because I'm helping the company to not spend time to dealing with the code that is complex. Engineers can do a much better job, much faster building new features, and I can build something better in future as well.
Sure.
So it's not difficult if you have data, if you gathered feedback and so on.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah. Thank you for that, Hengameh, and thank you for the lovely presentation.
Welcome.
Ryan, if you want to take over the mic, just unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Perfect.
Let me share.
Great stuff.
You guys see okay?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So Hengameh summed it up very well. Obviously, this topic that we're talking about in building a world-class product organization, there's so many different ways we could approach this and ultimately talk about a variety of different topics. So what I thought would make sense, and something that's very close to my heart, I spent over a decade of my career at a company called Intuit. And with Intuit, you learn pretty much from day one that the customer is center, and ultimately how to learn from customers with the goal of trying to identify big important problems that you can solve well and ultimately build big new businesses or big new products from. So I thought it would make sense for me to talk about one of the key ingredients for me, and as a CPO and a CTO, is wanting to make sure that my product organization is close to the customer. And it doesn't matter if it's in engineering, it doesn't matter if it's DevOps, doesn't matter if it's product management or designers. I want to make sure that my team and the organization is very much close to the customer. So, that's ultimately what we're going to talk about today in the time that I have with you guys.
Perfect.
So everybody, I think, has heard this quote, but Henry Ford always gets quoted a lot when I talk about customer-centric development. Is if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, and that's true. But what I'm going to share with you guys is not necessarily ask customers what they want, because I think all of our experience probably informs us that customers have a very tough time being able to project out in the future, and they talk about the kind of their immediate needs, immediate pain points that they have. What's more important, though, is what they don't say. It's more important to understand their behaviors, and observe and watch from that perspective. So one of the key topics, or one of the key things we're going to talk about, is customer-driven innovation. So it starts with deep customer empathy. For me, the principle number one is we got to make sure we're walking in our customer's shoes. And it's critically important to have that empathy as a product leader. And again, whether I'm an engineer and I'm trying to figure out, how to develop a better solution, or whether it's a designer and I'm trying to figure out what is a design that reduces steps or ultimately reduces friction. To be able to go in and learn from a customer and to develop deep empathy ultimately leads to us creating much better products as a product organization. Not only does it give inspiration, but for us to have that mental model that we can go back to and understand, yes, I remember when I was talking to customer X, or I remember when I was at their office and I observed and watched them trying to do a certain task, or I remember them in a usability session and they were doing a certain thing, and I remember the challenge and the frustration that they had. Ultimately, by doing this, it puts us in a mindset, and us as good product leaders, we're able to think about what are they trying to do, what are the aspirations that they have, and be able to come up with new innovations and new ideas, and come up with something that it truly transforms how they work, and ultimately leading to a huge breakthrough in the customer experience, or a huge breakthrough in a new product innovation. So again, principle number one is deep customer empathy. Principle number two is, and what I found many times is, it's really important that we fall in love with the problem versus fall in love with the solution. And in order to fall in love with the problem, it's going to lead to a lot of different ways to solve that problem. If we latch on to that solution too early, it's going to ultimately limit our ability to solve the problem well, and it's going to hinder our ability to come up with new innovations and new ideas. I know for me, I started my career as a product manager, and it was a hard skill and a hard trait to learn early on, because very much as a youth and as somebody who was starting my career in technology and product, I came from schooling, and in school you're taught that the right answer and having the right answer, or getting a test score, and a very much of an individual type of approach. You quickly learn that in product management, it's about facilitating, getting together a group of smart people, using data, understanding the customer, understanding the problems that they have, which are going to lead to a lot of different ideas, and ultimately the best idea. And it's important that you as a product leader can facilitate an environment that's going to come up with these ideas. So again, principle number two is generating lots of ideas. It's the classic case of a brainstorm. No idea is a bad idea. You're looking at the problem in a variety of different ways. Look at analogous industries to see how potentially that problem is being solved in other companies outside of your space. Looking at technology trends and thinking of, is there a way that we could solve this by a different way or a different technology that's starting to emerge, or starting to see what's going on in other countries or other geographies on how problems are solved. I know in the world of payments, looking at Asia and seeing how Asian consumer behavior in the world of payments, and how starting to see the shift in the behaviors there, that can lead to a lot of inspiration on potentially new ways and new breakthrough innovations that could solve the problems. Third principle, that we want to do is again, we start with deep customer empathy. We want to understand the customer better than they know themselves. Then we want to brainstorm and identify a bunch of ways to solve the problem. And then we want to quickly get input from the customers, not just what they say, but more importantly, what they do. So it's important that you're getting customer feedback. It's important that they have clickable prototypes that you can get in front of a customer. It's important to create what I call a dry wallet test, which is a way for you to get user behavior. You can put a concept in front of a user on a website or on a landing page. They quickly get to a place, using lean startup principles, where you are capturing that currency. So ultimately, from these three principles, you're going to be in a position that is going to start to inject the customer into your business. And it doesn't matter if it's a new feature, a new innovation, a new idea. If you adhere to kind of these three principles, you're going to start moving the needle and start to transform your organization, and starting to put the customer much closer and much more central to your product organization. So as leaders, how can we encourage innovation? I get this question a lot, and I think about 4 principles, and again, at Intuit, we spent a lot of time as leaders to really try to create an environment that's going to foster and cultivate innovation. So as a leader, it's important for you to set big, audacious goals, or to set a big challenge. And remember that you're not necessarily the customer, and it's important to think about what is this problem that we're trying to solve, and ultimately how as a leader can you create a challenge that's going to inspire and going to galvanize your organization to potentially lead to new innovation. So that's principle number 1. Second principle is you want to create an environment that's going to allow rapid experimentation. Google has been really, really strong in this area. Companies like Booking.com have also been very, very strong. Anytime that you start to allow the product organization to do experiments and run experiments, and to be able to get put those experiments and have them be customer facing, especially in a B2C environment where you're getting a lot of traffic, and also have the testing framework set up, A/B testing, and the instrumentation in place where you can measure the user behavior is very, very important. A good question to always ask is, as a new employee coming into the organization, how fast can I enable my new employees to begin to start to test ideas? How fast can I enable them to get feedback from customers? How fast can I enable them to start to potentially make an impact in the organization? So if we go back to that first principle around a big, hairy, audacious goal, if your goal is to, let's say in the world of payments, let's say 100% of payments being done, without cash. So if that's kind of the challenge and the goal, how fast can you create an environment whereby to enable your organization to run experiments and to try new innovations, new features, new ideas, and quickly test and market? So third principle, my peer talked about this around, you know, being able to pull insights from successes and failures. It's I've worked at companies and I've been a part of companies where there was such a negative stigma associated around failures, and so you end up when you have that type of culture and you have that type of environment, you tend to try to hide your failures, and you try to ultimately talk about good things. And so then as a result, you don't have a true balanced environment. And you also, you know, you look at so many different companies out there that came up, had their original ideas, or, you know, their 10th idea, and only to fail to eventually pivot into a path or into a space that ultimately got them to, you know, their breakthrough innovation. So, you know, it's critically important to have an environment that, of course, you're going to recognize and celebrate the successes, but in the case of the failures, you know, really want to recognize and reward those who were able to pull out the critical insights. Okay, so that failed. Well, why did it fail? What was there something wrong with the hypothesis? Was there something wrong with the test? You know, what are the nuggets that are worth salvaging? What are the things that we want to learn and glean and adjust and iterate for the next experiment? You know, Scott Cook, who was the founder of Intuit, you know, really wanted to make sure that we failed fast and ultimately celebrate the failures. And, you know, he role modeled this behavior time and time again. Anytime he was wrong, anytime that there was something that was a hypothesis that he had that ultimately was invalidated, he loved that. He really very much relished that he was in a mode of constantly learning. And so ultimately from that, you know, from that failure, he took it as a personal example of how he can get better, how he can learn, how he can adjust his thinking. And, you know, it's important for us as leaders to create an environment that is going to recognize that failing is a key part of ultimate getting to success. And then the last principle, and I just touched on this a bit, which is as leaders, what we do, what we say matters a lot, right? And in order for us to have an organization that is a world-class product organization, it's critically important that we as leaders role model the behavior that we're looking for. So, you know, if we are putting an idea on the top of a backlog because it's coming from us, you know, and without having to go through the same process as other ideas, then, you know, what are we teaching an organization? We're teaching an organization that your opinion matters the most, and as a product leader, and that no longer is data important, or, you know, testing the assumptions or testing the hypotheses. It's more important that title is the most important thing that gets the ideas out to be, you know, to be the best. So, you know, just to recap, in terms of I'm a huge believer of putting customer at the center of your product organization. You know, there are a variety of ways to do this, and do this starting today, if not tomorrow. But then also as a leader, what is it that we can do to really create a culture of innovation? What is it that we can do as a leader to ensure that customers are at the center, and that we're driving, you know, driving big change in our product organizations? So that summarizes my talk today. I'm keen to hear questions that you guys might have around this topic.
Thanks, Ryan. Just one of the questions, but first of all, I just wanted to say that was a very interesting point as well, and I really loved your slides. I feel that you kind of did different versions of the same reality we live in, but a very good touch as well. And one of the questions would be, what is your feeling about having a tech team in offshore?
Having a development team offshore?
Attack, yes.
Oh, I don't think there is such a thing as onshore, offshore anymore. I think, gone are the days when the center of the universe was the United States in the world of technology. And to me, it's about having a global distributed organization, irregardless of location. Some of the best engineers I've ever been a part of, and have had the pleasure to work alongside. They've come from South America, North America, Asia, Middle East, Africa. I mean, literally every continent, with the exception of Antarctica. But there's no such thing to me anymore as a product leader. If you, as a product leader, if you're thinking onshore, offshore, that's to me an old mindset.
Right, makes sense. And from your point of view, when it comes to companies, like we had this old model of everybody having to be, I don't know, face to face when it comes to products, everybody interacting 100%. Like it's been a bit of a shock, a culture shock maybe, or kind of within this business, to have people that never saw this possibly happening, like ever, to moving everything in a split of a second, to everybody home, you work from there. How do you counteract this, and how can you make it work?
Yeah, I think thankfully, COVID and the situation that we're in didn't happen 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if that would have happened 20 years ago, when we didn't have internet connectivity, when we didn't have tools like Slack, and when we didn't have email, when we didn't have video chats. I have spent 20 years in tech, and some of the most productive teams that I've been a part of, we never met face to face. And so, to me, it's a matter of being clear on what is the vision, what are we trying to solve, being clear on what are the goals and objectives. As my partner said, you're defining your OKRs, being clear on roles, responsibilities, and what does success look like, and figuring out what's the cadence, the operating mechanisms we're going to have. Here are the tools we're going to use, whether it's Jira, whether it's Slack, whether it's AHA, using product instrumentation like Mixpanel or Optimize, or again, the opportunities as a product person nowadays to be able to create a highly productive team without being face to face, using tools like Sketch, using tools like Marble App. It's we're in a very fortunate place at the time of technology, where we can be able to endure a situation, a pandemic like COVID, and yet still be able to, if not maintain productivity, in fact, probably increase productivity in a lot of regards. I think the next challenge is going to be, for all of us that are working 100% remote, is how do we mentally switch off? How do we put those barriers and walls in place? Because otherwise, with a distributed global team, and a world which operates 24/7, how do we as strong product leaders take that time to breathe, take that time to kind of take a step back and to kind of allow us to think and not just do.
Yeah, it's true. Thanks for the answer. And this one is for the two of you. If you can give me kind of your versions, what do you do when it comes to the communication between the teams? Now you have, certain companies that, okay, they have the vision, they have the kind of timelines and everything, but teams don't really communicate. Like there's a lost in translation thingy that happens. How do we counteract that? What do we do about it? What do you think, Hengameh?
Oh, sure. I was waiting for Ryan. His
I'll go
answers
back to
are
him
so
after.
good. It's like, yeah.
Just to give him a second to relax.
Exactly. Yes. For me, to be honest, I think it all depends, I would say.
Of course.
It depends which teams, which product. If these teams are cross countries, across different zones, or if they are located in one place, still they're suffering from this communication and so on, and what kind of how the team setup is.
Sure.
So all of these elements can result in a different solution and different way of communicating. But one thing that I learned works quite well, not just between engineers, but also between PMs and PM engineers and leaders, engineering management, and so on. From the time that you have this ideation to design and like the design of the product itself and so on, when you have it's very simple. Just have a Google document and start like putting everything in your brain there, and ask people to put their comments, suggest, and not don't consider that document as a finalized piece of information, and collaborate there together. I was not aware of such a collaboration before I joined Google, to be honest. Before that, I was always like working on different versions of the idea, and I was sharing the PDF or with people, waiting for some time, receiving back one line, interpreting it in my mind, writing the sentence that I wasn't. But then I learned it that I can write it down in document. Another person can even correct me, modify what I have written, and help me there. And then eventually we can go through this cycle. We finish, we will share it with other group. You have the history through the whole process until you finalize. This is one way that I realized that this is such a good tool to communicate these things. There are so many tools. There's so many tools. Depends on the familiarity and what team likes. Like this team at Google I was working with, they hated sprint planning. They did not want to do any sprint planning. And they were saying like, it's too old fashioned for us. It slow us back. And the new team I'm working now, they really complain if there is no sprint planning. They're lost. They want sprint planning. None of them is right or wrong here. It all depends how your team, how your like people you're working with, how mature they are in the way of communicating. What kind of tool are they using? What are they familiar with? How open-minded they are to change and try a new tool at all. And does organization provide such tool to them either or not? But one more thing that I think will be very helpful is knowledge sharing. Like people easily and freely, feeling very comfortable, just sharing their knowledge with other people and with other teams. One example could be you can set up some virtual beer time with your teams, and during this beer time, you might have some prototype and present it to team and get the feedback and so on, for example, and then see who thinks what. This is okay, then I got distracted now and I will hand over to Ryan to talk.
Sorry, guys, I've got 2 3.5-month-old puppies. You're bringing it's time to show pets and show and tell time. So what was the question again? No, I'm joking. Communication. Communication is such a broad topic, right? And we can talk about communication tools, we can talk about communication styles, we can talk about what's the best means. So I learned long ago, first a couple kind of important tips. One was we as adults need to hear something 8 times before we retain the information on average. So that's one. Second is each of us have different ways to consume information. So for some it's email, for some it's auditory, for some it's through text or WhatsApp or Slack. It's important as a product leader that you understand your team styles and don't try to force everybody to consume information the same way. So, if you've got some people that prefer email, great. You got some people that texts are best or WhatsApp's best, great. You got some that are best through some sort of visual, great. We as leaders need to be flexible and ultimately figure out what is the right style. And given the message, what's the right approach for a given message on how to communicate, and know that me mentioning it one time in a stand-up doesn't qualify as communication. It just qualifies as a mention, versus expect a team to retain it.
Fair enough. Absolutely. Right. So I see there's no other questions, so I think we'll wrap this up slowly. Thanks again, guys, for your time and expertise in the field and for everything. Basically, from going on onwards, I just wanted to say that we will organize a group on LinkedIn for everybody to join. Feel free to bring in colleagues and friends in the same field, just to, like I said, exchange info and knowledge. And it's going to be a bit easier to organize future events as opposed to emails. We'll follow up with links on the recording so everybody can see it, and we'll keep track of everything that we have spoken about, etc. And then feel free to also give us a feedback on kind of new topics, ideas everybody would like to kind of cover, discuss about, and so on. So any ideas on the table would be great. So it's been great to having everybody here. Looking forward to see everybody again, and I hope in bigger numbers in the future. And also stay safe and all the best, everybody.
Thank you all.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.